watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. News headlines this evening have been dominated by the ongoing tussle in Maharashtra that is seeing no end in sight. The story hasn't changed much. The Shiv Sena is insisting on sharing the CM seat with the BJP. They won't relent. The BJP, despite claims of having the numbers, has not moved yet to form government. The new twist, though, is the Shiv Sena has now felt the need to hide away their MLAs in a Mumbai hotel so that they aren't poached. That is a new low perhaps for Maharashtra politics. The standoff means Maharashtra does not have a new government even 2 weeks after the elections. If there is no government by the 9th of this month, there could be a constitutional crisis in the state because that's when the assembly expires. But that is not the big story we want to focus on tonight. The real story in Maharashtra is taking place far away from Mumbai, where backroom negotiations between the BJP and the Sena are on, forming the government. It's taking place across the state, where 54 lakh hectares of standing crops have been destroyed by unseasonal rains. It's taking place in remote villages where farmers are committing suicide. I want to begin the show this evening by playing out for you a ground report from the village of Girnare in Maharashtra's Nasik district, where my colleague Neha Tyagi saw firsthand the havoc these unseasonal rains have caused.
Girnare is a small village located 20 kilometers away from Nasik and almost 200 kilometers away from the dazzling life of Mumbai. It has a small population of 6,000 people, mostly dependent on agriculture and contract labor. Known for its exports of tomatoes and grapes to the Middle East and the UK, the small but prosperous village is now dealing with the aftermath of massive crop damage because of the excessive rainfalls between the months of September and October. Income of people in Girnare and the other 35 villages around is primarily dependent on two things. Firstly, agriculture, and then industry, the villages being closer to Nasik MIDC. On one hand, excessive monsoons have destroyed crops which have led to massive losses. On the other hand, the industries, especially auto industries, have had to lay off thousands of people because of the impact on demand and consumption.
खेती में टमाटो करता हूँ, पर लेकिन टमाटो में अभी बारिश के ऊपर पूरा ख़राब हो गया है। अभी कुछ भी नहीं, फोर्स पूरा नुकसान हो गया, कुछ भी मुझे एक भी झाड़ बचा नहीं।
तो आपने कितना लगाया था और कितना नुकसान?
मैंने आधा एकड़ लगाया था, उसके ऊपर उसको खर्चा आ गया 30,000 और 30,000 में 20,000 भी नहीं हो सकता है।
Main crops grown by people in Girnare are grapes, tomato, green vegetables like brinjal, rice and sugarcane. Losses of grape farmers will be higher due to the high value and delicate nature of the crops. Rains have caused severe damage to the crops by inducing flower shedding and impacting seed setting. Data available with the Divisional Commissionerate shows number of affected farmers in Nasik alone is over 1.52 lakh.
अंगूर उगाते हैं, अंगूर है हमारे पास, टमाटर है, चावल है, तो अंगूर पे हमारा बहुत बड़ा नुकसान हुआ है। 50% नुकसान हुआ अंगूर का हमारा। तो उसमें तो जो खर्चा होना का तो हो गया अभी, तो नुकसान तो बहुत बड़ा हुआ है हमारा, बहुत बड़ा असर पड़ा है ना। तो उधर भी मंदी छा गई अभी, हम लोग नहीं जाएंगे तो उधर का मार्केट भी नहीं चलेगा। किसान को मिलेगा तो तभी उधर का मार्केट चलेगा, मजदूर को भी मिलेगा। हमारा घर का तो दिवाली तो बारिश में ही चला गया, सब बारिश धोके लेकर गए भी रहे दिवाली हमारी।
The fact that majority of people in and around Girnare village are dependent on agriculture, the fact that they've seen a massive hit as far as their income is concerned, has also had a cascading impact on other small businesses, leading to a lot of people shutting shops. The demand for not just discretionary products but also essentials and staples have taken a major hit.
मार्केट में कोई लेने वाला जो लेते थे हमारे इधर के किसान लोगों के, वो कम ज़्यादा ले रहे। जो बोल रहे 10 किलो लेते चीज़ वो 2 किलो ले रहे, जो 5 लीटर तेल वाले ले रहे वो 2 लीटर में कर रहे। ऐसे एडजस्टमेंट है। पूरे 6 महीने से बहुत मंदी आ रही है मार्केट में। इसके पहले बहुत अच्छे मार्केट चल रहा था, पिछले साल तो दिवाली बहुत अच्छी गई थी, पर इस साल पूरे मंदी आ गई मार्केट में।
बर्तन के लिक्विड आता है तो वो बोतल में लाती है, तो मैंने 20 रुपए के पैकेट लाए। हर शैम्पू भी बोतल लाती है तो मैं पाउच का यूज करती है। ऐसे हर चीज़ में मैंने कम खर्च किया है।
What we are picking up from spending an entire day at Girnare village and talking to multiple people is that there is a consumption slowdown, more pronounced and severe than the urban parts of the country. Rural households are struggling to stay afloat. They are curtailing expenses, not just towards discretionary items, but also essentials and staples. But the reason behind this consumption slowdown is not just one excessive rainfall. There are bigger and far deeper issues that are plaguing the agrarian economy in India that the government needs to find long-term solutions for. This is Neha Tyagi from Girnare village, Nasik for ET Now.
So it's not just Maharashtra. Unseasonal and staggered rains have destroyed standing Kharif crops in at least 6 states. So far, crop insurance mechanisms seem to have failed. Joining me today to speak on the impact of these rains on the agricultural sector are Siraj Hussain, former Agricultural Secretary, YK Alag, Economist and former Union Minister, and Professor Narendra Pani, of course, Professor at NIA. Welcome to all of you and thank you for speaking with us today. Mr. Hussain, why don't you start by giving us an idea of the extent of damage these unseasonal rains have done?
A number of states saw very high rainfall in the month of August and September. And some of the states, especially in western India, western Madhya Pradesh, parts of Maharashtra, Gujarat, saw very high rainfall in September, which continued in October. And in fact, some districts of Maharashtra are still seeing very heavy rainfall even in November. In fact, I was looking at the data and I find that rainfall in some southern states is about 50% higher in the post-monsoon period. So yes, there is very untimely incidence of rains in several parts of India, but there are large parts of India, especially in northwest, Haryana for example, Delhi, parts of western UP, which have seen deficient rainfall during monsoon. So the picture is mixed. We cannot say that the entire country has seen excess rainfall, but yes, some parts have been very severely affected.
Okay, Professor Pani, let's talk about what this has done to various kinds of crops. Now, for example, in Maharashtra, we've seen the impact almost immediately in food inflation prices of products like onion, etc. And what really does it do to the farmer? What kind of a position does it put the farmer in when standing crops are destroyed because of this kind of unseasonal rain?
It's obvious that the impact is greatest on the farmer. The loss is borne primarily by him. But the issue really is I think, a slightly larger one. Are we seeing these unseasonal rains just as a one-off event, or is it linked to climate change in any way? This is not necessarily a comfortable question, but it's a question that must be asked. And then we need to see whether our national strategies on climate change are in any way linked to this. These unseasonal floods are happening too often over the last few years, and I don't think we can just turn a blind eye to it. As far as the farmers are concerned, they would need to develop an effective system of crop insurance if they are going to be left in this plight, which would mean that they might have to pay much higher premiums, but it would give them a more realistic picture of the risk they are taking by simply cultivating their crops in a new regime of unseasonal climatic events. So I think there is a need for realism on this, and if the farmer finds that process of crop insurance too expensive, then you must look at non-agrarian options for farmers on a very large scale. We are already seeing a decline in cultivators, in several million less cultivators than they were 10 years ago. And if that is happening now and people are moving out, we need to come to terms with it and see if we can develop alternative avenues for employment, or at least create processes where farmers themselves can take their investments elsewhere.
I'm glad you brought up the question of insurance, because that really and truly is the actual debate. Mr. Alag, thank you for joining us on the show, and just to talk about the much touted crop insurance scheme. Unseasonal rains or climatic conditions like this are not something that anyone can control. The idea of the crop insurance scheme was put in place as a safety net. Anecdotally, so far it hasn't really helped. There have been protests at some of the offices of these insurance companies, and farmers are not sure whether they will actually even be covered.
I think the first thing to do is to recognize that we face some pretty serious problems. That delayed rainfall, made up later on by excess rainfall, some or the other, we give these aggregate figures. Rainfall is more than so many percentage points. But actually what it does is that the farmer is forced into behavior which makes losses. She or he doesn't grow the preferred crops that they wanted. They have to move away from the preferred crops to other crops. By and large, by the beginning of August, crop coverage was less than 6% of last year's Kharif, which was also somewhat below normal. So some or the other, giving these average figures doesn't take care of the problem. And rainfall after the withdrawal of the monsoon definitely creates a major issue. Now, by and large, crop insurance is still an insurance for the banks for the loans that they give. It is not really taking care of the actuarial problems at taluka and other levels. There is really no such thing as aggregate rainfall.
Yeah.
It's a highly time-specific and area-specific phenomena. And we don't have, in spite of everything that we say, the crop insurance coverage to take care of this.
Yes.
I think there is something to be said for the fact that maybe we are seeing some climate change factors. Now, you know, if you talk with people, they still say that they'll find out that in the last 100 years there might have been a year or two when this has happened. But, you know, really, I mean, I happen to be an econometrician. Whether during the last few years we are seeing unusual behavior, we shouldn't really, you know, take a very long-term period and say that, listen, this is taking place. I think there is some seriousness on this. Somebody like P.N. Mishra, who is the Secretary to the Prime Minister, he has written a very interesting piece on disasters, and he is saying that it is related with climate change. So I think that we are facing unusual weather, and insurance, which is generally takes care of the average phenomena, is not being able to take care of this at the level of disaggregation where it really helps the farmer. I hope I'm not being over technical on it, but if you need any further
Yes. No, but
clarification, I'll be very happy
in fact,
to do
that's
that.
an important point, because insurance companies are hesitant about being part of the current scheme as it exists, even without the context of this possibly being, you know, a phenomenon of climate change and weather becoming more erratic. I just want to focus a little bit on the insurance factor, and let me come to you, Mr. Hussain, on the mechanism of the insurance scheme. And you know, the sort of landmark anchor insurance scheme that the Prime Minister has launched, whether it's working for farmers or not.
Actually, I cannot say that the insurance scheme is a total failure. However, in a paper which I wrote with Dr. Gulati about a year and a half back, we documented what is happening in various states in different clusters. And now we have written another paper in which we have examined 6 seasons. See, the thing is that for any crop insurance scheme to succeed, we need very strict discipline across different players, ranging from the state government to the insurance company to reinsurance company, and then banks, and then central government. So I'll give you just one example. Insurance is basically a coverage for risk, and if the farmers are allowed to take insurance after the forecast of monsoon is issued, then obviously there will be adverse selection. So the first forecast of monsoon is issued around April, and our insurance scheme at present allows farmers to take insurance up to July. So obviously, once the behavior of monsoon is known, then the companies quote a high rates, and farmers in the states which are thought to be deficient take more insurance. As a result of that, the insurance companies suffer losses, and that is why we have seen many private insurers getting out of insurance business. So there are a whole lot of issues in the current policy, that is Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, and we have not found a technological solution to crop cutting. So everything depends on crop cutting, and there is no solution to that. Therefore, in our view, in a forthcoming paper we are documenting that we think that a better alternative for the next 2-3 years would be a weather based crop insurance scheme.
Okay, what about the mechanism of that scheme? The extent of its coverage to farmers as it stands today. Professor Pani, you made a point that the insurance scheme is more sort of an insurance for those giving the loans, the lenders in this case. Do you think the focus right now needs to be to increase that coverage? Because we're seeing the responses of every state government to the distress. In Maharashtra, for example, they've given a 10,000 crore rupee figure that will help out with this. No one knows how many people is actually reaching out to. We've already heard about farmer suicides coming in just in the beginning of this month from Marathwada. How does the response mechanism really match up to the need?
See, there is a certain lack of realism in the understanding of the crop insurance scheme. The fact is, any insurance scheme only works when the premiums cover the entire risk. And here, the premium, as the risk increases, the premiums would have to increase. Now, that may not be affordable for a large number of farmers, and therefore the governments try to keep those rates down. But the moment you do that, the scheme itself becomes unviable. It becomes a contradiction in terms that you cannot have high risk and low premiums. So the issue then is that you try various ways to cover it up, to pretend it's working, or to at least say that we can make it work out, or put additional pressure on state or central governments, and there's a blame game around it. But the fundamental problem is that your risks are increasing and you want to keep your premiums down. I think unless we can come to terms with that and face that hard fact, what we're talking about crop insurance will only be a lot of detail which looks good, but the basic, it'll be fundamentally flawed. And I think that's an issue that we have to deal with. And if the premiums are high, whether you want to subsidize it at that stage, those are all issues that can be looked at, whether you want to step up the subsidies at that stage. But to not get a realistic sense of the premiums and the risk is, I think, at the heart of the problem.
So then let's look at possible solutions and how we need to plan for this further, because there seems to be a consensus here on the fact that this could maybe not be a one-off, where we are seeing scanty rainfall in the beginning of the season, then very heavy rainfall, and then some rainfall even after the monsoon withdraws. Mr. Alok, let me come to you on what kind of a mechanism now needs to be put into place, and who's going to pay for these increased premiums? Where are you going to find the companies to come into the market?
Well, listen, I mean, if the risk is as great as it is, then you are really saying that the actuarial calculation will demand a high premium. Now, there is no magic to all this. I mean, you can't really solve this problem. That we are saying that Indian agriculture faces a lot of uncertainty. This is classically true. In addition, there seems to be the uncertainty of rainfall after the monsoon is over. I mean, in my state right now, procurement has stopped because rain spoiled the crop. So, if the premium is so high, the real premium, then you're talking about a real problem. Now, papering it over crop cutting experiments. I mean, listen, I happen to be a former chairman of the NSSO. Yeah. We just don't do crop cutting experiments which give us yield data at the taluka level. And here the phenomena is is highly regional specific. So you really try to paper over the whole thing.
Yeah.
What it really needs is more subsidy. That you are facing a crisis and the farmer needs to be supported there. That it's as simple as that. Otherwise you keep on trying to put some plaster here,
Yeah.
some plaster there, give it a big name. But these problems have been going on for almost 10 years now. And even before that. And yes, there are pockets where the scheme seems to be working better than at other places, but by and large, it doesn't really meet the uncertainty of Indian agriculture. It's as simple as that.
I don't know, are more subsidies the answer? And how efficient are those subsidies? Let me get Mr. Hussain in. And if anyone wants to come in on any of the points, please indicate and I'll come to you. Mr. Hussain, interesting point that Mr. Alag has made. More subsidies is the answer? Okay. Yes, Mr.
Subsidy
Alag.
is a wrong word.
Yes.
Subsidy is a wrong word.
Yes, please do continue. Yes, Mr. Alag, I'm listening to you.
No, subsidy is the wrong word. The point is that we have always had schemes where in the period of weather crisis, droughts, excessive rainfall, we go to the support of that area.
Yeah.
Now, in a way, it's a subsidy. These used to be large sums, that is, the Finance Commission takes care of it to an extent.
Right.
Those things are becoming more expensive. And agriculture is also becoming more diversified. You heard the problems with grapes and vegetables and fruits.
Yes.
The kind of monies involved is much more than if you are doing paddy farming. So, as agriculture becomes more complex, the economic effect of some of these crisis events is larger.
Right.
It affects very large numbers of people.
Okay.
As a country, we have always had the approach that we will come to their assistance. That is the point I'm making.
Yeah, no, we can use some other word, but effectively, you call it larger government intervention, you call it assistance, you call it subsidy, which is an unpopular term, but I get the drift. Mr. Hussain, your response to that point, do you think that's the solution, that the government needs to buckle down and sort of invest more in a safety net? And again, the question will come, where are the funds for that?
Surely there are various sectors of agricultural economy in which more investment is needed.
Yeah.
But I must bring on record that the total premium subsidy being given by the central government and the state governments together is about 28,000 crores. Now, what is this subsidy? Basically, the companies quote actuarial premium depending on the assessment of risk for a particular cluster. The farmer pays a very small percentage of that, 2% and 2.5% for Kharif and Rabi and Kharif crops, and the balance is paid by the government as premium subsidy, 28,000 crores. See, the thing is that a recent study done by the government shows that most of the claims and this premium subsidy is going to 50 districts of India. So these 50 districts where their risk perception is much higher because of poor rainfall and some other reasons, there the insurance companies quote very high actuarial premium. In fact, in some cases it is as high as 40%. Certain groundnut districts in Gujarat, for example, get a premium of more than 40%. So farmer is paying 2%, 38% is subsidy in these districts. So surely we need more investment in other aspects of agriculture. However, in case of crop insurance, I think for the time being, till we find a solution to crop cutting, we need to move to weather-based crop insurance scheme, where depending on the weather parameters, the farmer is paid irrespective of the damage to his crop. His crop may or may not be damaged, but he will still get the claim.
Professor Bani, we focused quite a lot on the insurance aspects on it, but let's just broaden the scope of this discussion. In terms of what can be done by farmers and by governments in charge to ensure that there is some kind of a backup. Now, in the ground report that we showed in the beginning of this discussion, where our teams went and spoke to people, suddenly these farmers, these families find themselves wiped out. They have invested all of their money in the hope of one crop. They're already reeling from an economic slowdown, and they find themselves wiped out. Any government assistance also might not be very efficient in reaching those who need it, and might not be enough to cover everyone.
You see, the strategy has to be twofold. We need to recognize that over time in any development strategy, there is a movement away from agriculture. Particularly in countries like India, which follow a system of dividing the farms with every generation, you end up with large tracts of land being converted or consisting of very small farms which are not viable. And so you have the amount of land being left fallow increasing across the board. You need a new form of agriculture that can tap that, whether it's a kind of a cooperative or any other thing where people or state supported cooperatives or public private partnerships that will just essentially offer the service of cultivating land that is being left fallow. That as a result of which the farmer, the very small farmer, can actually move out and find work elsewhere, or at least look for work elsewhere. Now when you create such systems, you allow for that smooth transition out of agriculture. Without that, the farmer is functioning on close to the margin, if you like. He's functioning virtually at a level where if things go well, he makes a profit, and if things go even moderately badly, he's under pressure. This is particularly true in states like Maharashtra for the middle farmers. The smaller farmers can become agricultural labor and leave their land fallow. But the middle farmers would find that beneath their prestige, beneath their status, they try to keep farming. And then when you have a calamity like this, it destroys them completely. But I think it's equally important to recognize that they are vulnerable even to much smaller calamities. So you need a strategy that sees farmers as people rather than people with a particular occupation alone. And if their future depends upon moving out of farming into other elements while their land acts as a safety net cultivated by another agency, these are all options that we need to look at. Merely taking a crisis or going to agriculture after a crisis has taken place will only come up with distress stories and very depressing stories and very real stories. But we cannot try to find a solution in an agriculture, in a country where over 50% of your workers remain in agriculture, though you're claiming to grow very, very rapidly. Nowhere in the world does industrialization take place with a substantial agriculture. That dependence has to come down. And the question is whether in a country as large as India, you're able to do that in a relatively smooth process.
Well, that's a question now going on since decades. And the move has happened, but right now we're at a juncture where job opportunities in other sectors have also dwindled. Mr. Alak, do you want to wrap up with the kind of policy focus and direction that we need, looking at the possibility that this is not just happened this 1 year, it could happen again?
You see, basically, some of the most successful answers that we have seen is groups like producer companies. They are able to take advantage of the fact that agricultural demand, I mean, this is not true of a year like this where there is a slowdown, but generally agricultural demand is going up. There is diversification, there is what you call food inflation, which is basically not so much in grain crops, but in non-grain crops. And producer companies, which tend to have the advantage of companies, together with cooperatives, they are really far more than what is registered in either with NABARD or with the Ministry of Agriculture and Corporate Affairs. These kinds of experiments are taking place on a very large scale. I sort of happen to be the granddaddy of producer companies because the original design was done by me in the Companies Act, Second Amendment of 2002,
Yeah.
I think it's a mistake to bring it back to the Agriculture Ministry, because the Agriculture Ministry still tends to think in somewhat conventional lines.
Right.
But companies where you have audit, where you have expertise, where you take advantage of diversification, they are able to absorb some of this risk. And many of them are now going global. I mean, I get these telegrams that I'm selling at the London such and such coffee exchange. We are doing this. So more of this, actually it is happening much larger than what we think it is, because our statistics are somewhat covered. I think it's a mistake to bring it back to the Ministry of Agriculture, which the present legislation is trying to do. It should remain with the Department of Company Affairs. We should encourage these forms of experimentation where farmers get together,
Right.
they are able to absorb the risk. There we'll be able to help them with some of the schemes that
Yeah.
Siraj Hussain and Pani and others have been talking about. And then they do well. And there are a very large number of them who are doing well.
Yes.
But this thing has to become a deluge. It doesn't have to be just good practice cases.
No, you need larger thinking, larger.
I see that
Yeah.
as the answer.
Larger thinking, larger policy moves than just big schemes which may not really solve the problem. We have to also start looking at the possibility that this is not something which has happened just this year. It could happen again and again. Where is the safety net in place, not just for farmers but for all of us, truly. I want to thank all of you for joining us in this deep dive into how unseasonal rains have wreaked havoc for farmers in several parts of the country. But even as we talk about this in the context of climate change and what is happening around us, I want to take a break with these visuals of the Yamuna River. Now, we've heard about all of that pollution in the Delhi NCR region. That's what it's done to the river Yamuna. This is toxic foam on top of the river Yamuna. This is the state which we are in right now, and we really have to wake up and take notice of what's happening around us. It's no longer a scary fact in the future. It's very much here. Let's not close our eyes to it. We'll take a very short break, but on the other side, we're talking about India's decision to walk out of the RCEP deal earlier this week. It has been lauded, but it has also been criticized. We're going to get you both sides of the debate when we come back. Don't go away.